All right, Alexander, let's talk about some of the rhetoric that is coming out of Germany with regards to Russia, blaming Russia and Putin for everything, including Germany's economic decline, economic recession, deindustrialization. Blame it on Russia. And I would like to hear your thoughts on CDU, CSU, Merz as well, and his ultimatum to Putin as well, with regards to the conflict in Ukraine, his 24-hour ultimatum to Putin, or at least urging the German parliament to issue this ultimatum, either Putin stop or Taurus missiles will be sent to Ukraine in 24 hours. Anyway, let's start with Schulzs and the German economy and Russia, and then if you could chime in on Merz and his statements, because Merz could be Chancellor of Germany.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, more likely than not, he will be. I mean, if the polls continue the way they are, all of these statements, both the ones by Schulz and the ones by Merz, show you in what a mess Germany is in, and how concerned and worried now the political establishment in Germany, both the SPD side and the CDU side, now is. Bear in mind that the most likely outcome of the parliamentary elections next year will be a coalition of the CDU and the SPD. I mean, another grand coalition. I mean, that seems to me to be where we're heading, based on the opinion polls. So they're very worried. They're seeing their support erode, but more importantly, they're also seeing the economy that they presided over, and which has made them such a powerful force in the world, and above all in Europe, that's now weakening and closing down and failing all around them. So they want to do two things. On the one hand, they want the war to end. And they want the war to end as quickly as possible, because they realize that the war is a losing proposition. It is economically disastrous for Germany. And secondly, they want to put all the blame, to shift all the blame for what has happened away from themselves. So Scholz, once again, fabricates this story that it's the Russians who are causing economic crisis in Germany. It is the Russians who switch off the gas. It's the Russians who switch off the oil. I mean, it is incredible that they say all of this when, the facts are there so straightforwardly. Disprove them. But anyway, they are increasingly talking in this way. But, take a step back and ask yourself this question, which I think a lot of people in Germany, but I can tell you for a fact, a lot of people in Germany are asking. Let's assume anyway that what Schulz said was actually true. That is, the Russians have taken this retaliatory action, which has caused Germany's economy to implode. Well, Germany imposed sanctions on Russia. It was involved in freezing the Russian central bank assets. It confiscated Gazprom's facilities in Germany itself, the underground storage places, the transfer lines, all of that kind of thing, all Gazprom property, all simply seized by the German government without any kind of compensation being paid. Germany's imposed, sanctions after sanctions on Russia. And here is Scholz, here are the German leaders coming round and complaining about what the Russians have done to them. Now, if the Russians are able to do all of these things, were able to do all of these things, then a wise government in Germany would have surely worked to ensure that relations with Russia remained stable. And perhaps that would have led a wise government to tread very carefully in a place as important to Russia as Ukraine. So, I mean, even in terms of its own logic, what Schulzs is saying makes absolutely no sense. But it is wrong anyway. It's untrue anyway. But either way, Schulzs wins. He looks like the Chancellor who wrecked a relationship, which he is now implicitly admitting was fundamental for Germany's economic well-being. So they understand that they have to end the war as fast as they can. They can't really think or find a way to do it. Schulzs supposedly is trying to come up with some kind of a peace plan, but of course a peace plan which involves concessions to the Russians, concessions which he has previously ruled out. These are territorial concessions, and which the Russians are rejecting. Merz, who represents the party that has previously represented or acted to safeguard the interests of the Mittelstand, the middle people, the people who have all the family businesses who are so important in German society and the German economy, also, connected with big business as well. He also understands that the war needs to be ended as quickly as possible. He doesn't want to. He also understands that the war has been a disaster for Germany. So what he can come up with, he's not going to go along with Schulz's peace plan, because, of course, that will make him look weak and all that. And besides, Schulz's peace plan is going to fail. So he comes up with this crazy idea of an ultimatum to the Russians, who are, of course, winning, and an ultimatum threatening things which the Pentagon has already rejected. I mean, it's already, it is irrational and it's absurd. But it again shows you the extent to which the German political class understands that everything has gone wrong, but they don't have the political imagination or the strength of will to change course, to recognize the terrible mistakes that were made, not just in 2022, but going all the way back to the Minsk Agreement in 2015 and everything that happened afterwards, the failure to implement the Minsk Agreement, the failure to negotiate with the Russians in good faith, the constant harassment of the Russians on all sorts of issues, Navalny, Nord Stream, all of that, refusing to acknowledge any of that. Schulzs comes up, he rails at the Russians, he proposes peace plans which are never going to succeed. And Merz, his likely successor, comes up instead with reckless and, in fact, ludicrous proposals for ultimatums against the Russians, which the Russians, all it's going to do is annoy them, and it's not going to change anything or make anything better for Germany. On the contrary, it's going to make the situation for Germany even worse.
What happened to German leadership? And I include Angela Merkel in this, because you mentioned Merkel, Minsk. Did Merkel? I mean, it was no secret that Putin and Merkel, even though they worked together, and they worked together. Some would argue they worked together quite well. They had an understanding, but they didn't like each other.
No.
At least Merkel never liked Putin on a personal level. No. At least those are the reports that we've gotten over the years, and I think that's accurate. Mm-hmm. Did Merkel back in 2015-16? Was she let in on some sort of a plan, some sort of an idea to remove Putin and to finally be done with the Russian Federation, and have the German leaders after Merkel, Schulz, and possibly Merz, are they just carrying this plan forward from the powers that be, the powers above Merkel? Because the German leadership, I'm trying to understand why Germany has chosen to destroy itself, why the German leadership has chosen to destroy Germany There are German politicians who don't want to go down this route. To be fair, there are good German politicians who are taking a stand now against the deindustrialization and the destruction of Germany, the German model, the German economic model. They're trying to stop this. But why are these prominent politicians, Schulzs, Merz, Baerbock, Habeck, Merkel, Steinmeier, the president as well?
Yeah.
Why are they pushing for Germany's disintegration? Economic disintegration, for sure.
It is a massive question. I mean, one thing one has to say is that Germany, since the Second World War, was always very, very capably led. I mean, you had a whole succession of very able chancellors, Adenauer, Brandt, Schmidt, Kohl. These were, substantial, powerful, strong leaders who, you might not always have agreed with, but I mean, they charted a strong course and they defended German interests. Now, what happened? Well, I think at one level, we did see a major change with Merkel, in that Merkel looks increasingly like some kind of a transitional figure, because one senses that at some point in the early 2000s, when Schröder, her predecessor, took a stand against the Iraq war, some kind of reaction took place in Germany, presumably from the very, very powerful Atlanticist forces that exist in Germany, that must never happen again, that we must never have a leader in Germany who takes a stand against the United States. Almost certainly, by the way, all of this coordinated with the neocons in Washington. So Schröder was not only gradually, pushed out of power through elections, I mean, it must be said, but he was also discredited. I mean, a successful, capable chancellor with a very impressive record, but the whole reputation has been completely destroyed in Germany now. And Merkel comes in. She's tough, clever, deeply cynical, in my opinion, entirely unprincipled. On the one hand, she goes along with all of this. She sees what's happened to Schröder. She doesn't want the same thing to happen to herself. At the same time, she understands, because she's clever and she comes from East Germany, how important the relationship with the Russians is. So she tries to keep things, as she always does, on some sort of, balance. She goes to Moscow in 2015. She talks to Putin during the fighting in Debaltseve. They agree the Minsk ideas together. They negotiate Minsk. That looks like it's going to sort things out for Germany. She then completes the deal with Nord Stream 2, which, as we've pointed out in program after program after program, it was the Germans who sought it, not the Russians. The Russians at that time were deeply skeptical about it. And at the same time, she then discovers that there is this Atlanticist backlash, that the Americans and the British aren't happy. So then she very cynically, but very typically, shifts position, where initially she's tilted back towards the Russians. She's got Nord Stream 2. Now she starts to string the Russians along. Very typical of Merkel. And she just goes on doing it. And she allows, as a result, a anti-Russian, feeling to develop in Germany, because she's never going to risk her position within Germany by taking these people on. And at the same time, what she does is she continues the process of purging everybody across the political system who is any good and who might conceivably be a challenger to her. So the result is that we're left with weak political leaders, people who follow the leadership of the EU centre, of which, of course, Merkel was effectively the chief. We must never forget that. I mean, she also played a big role there as well. So weak leaders, very unwilling to take on the Atlanticist faction within Germany itself, which controls the media, by the way. And the result is that we end up in this disastrous situation, which we now are, and these weak leaders, Merz, Schulzs, and the others, unable to steer a course for Germany out of this mess. The one blames the Russians, the other threatens them. Neither can come up with any real idea of how to turn this round.
All right, we will end the video there. TheDuran.locals.com. We are on Rumble, Odyssey, BitChute, Telegram, Rockvid, and Twitter X. And go to the Duran shop, pick up some merch like the t-shirts we are wearing in this video update. You will find a link in the description box down below. Use the code October20 and get 20% off all merchandise from our shop. Take care.